everyone could join us midday for the new IEP training. It's really not new. We're just going to talk about the IEP and where you might find things now so that you're looking in the right place. Nothing's changed as far as the content. So go ahead, Lisa. We're going to talk a little bit about who we are. For those who don't know. There we go. Next page. So for those that don't know who CPAC is, we are Connecticut's Parent Training and Information Center. We have been since 1983. We are a statewide nonprofit organization, and we offer information and support related to special education. Our program and staff are either individuals with disabilities or parents of children with disabilities. My name is Leona Domchek. I have 3 children with varying learning needs. And I'm happy to be part of this today. Lisa, you want to?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Opert. I'm a parent consultant alongside Leona at CPAC. I have 4 children, and 2 of them currently have IEPs. One of them has a 504. And we're really happy to be here to share with you guys. Thank you so much for coming.
Well, flip to the next page.
Oh, yeah.
So we have a lot of partners. We're very happy to work, obviously, with the Department of Education. That's under IDA and kind of the core and foundation of who we are. We also work closely with the Connecticut Department of Education. We're part of the statewide family engagement grant, a partner there. We have a partnership with the Offices of Early Childhood and the Down Syndrome Association of Connecticut as well. Our vision at CPAC is that all families will have the confidence, knowledge, and understanding that they need to effectively advocate for their children and to partner with professionals to ensure that children and youth grow to learn to their full potential. And that's what brings us here today. Our mission at CPAC is to educate, support, and empower Connecticut's diverse families and children, families of children and youth with any disability of chronic condition, ages birth to 26. And I feel like the age range is really important because sometimes people think we're just school aged, and the professionals who serve them. So today we're going to talk about, we hope your key takeaways will be that you're going to learn the key components of the individual education plan, the IEP, which we're going to refer to a lot as the IEP from this point forward. Get an introduction to the new Connecticut IEP forms, which became effective July of 2022, and gain an understanding of where to find pertinent information in your child's IEP. So what is an IEP? Because that's where we need to start. The individual education plan is the written plan that details each child's special education and related services. The IEP is the core of IDA, Individuals with Disability Education Act, and all students receiving special education services must have an IEP. The IEP must be reviewed at least annually. So in Connecticut, in July of 22, the new IEP forms went into effect, and the forms would go into effect on the day of the child's annual review, whatever date that is. So slowly rolling it out. The goal of the state is to improve the quality of the IEPs in Connecticut, and it is presented in sections, no longer pages, so that when you view it, and you're going to see it later in this presentation, all the information related should be in one area. Parents will only get the sections that apply to their child. An example would be if your child's not transition age yet, then those pages would not be part of your IEP. Prior written notice, record of meeting, and summary are now separate documents. So about CTSEDS, Connecticut Special Education Department System, data system, sorry, is a new system of data collection for all students with IEP. So you hear a lot of talk about CT sets. This is what we're talking about, the data system that now collects all the information for the IEPs. There is a link to the parent guardian portal allowing access to their child's IEP from any computer, tablet, or phone with the personal access code that you will get. And the personal access codes will change every time a parent accesses the link to the portal.
I did want to add too that not all districts are currently using the parent portal. So
yes, thank you.
If you wanted to know if yours was, you can reach out through email to your caseworker and just give a quick question of, are you planning to use the parent portal this year? So
thank you, Lisa. And some data is collected and stored within the new IEP, but not printed on the IEP document. For example, language of the family. Lisa's going to take over from here.
So I'm going to take over here, and we're going to go through each page or each section of the IEP, still trying to unlearn saying pages every time. So this is
Lisa, real quick before you get started on the next section, if you guys do have questions and you want to stop on a particular page, please feel free to either put it in the chat or just raise your hand and we'll do our best.
Absolutely. So this is our student information page, and this will have all the same information that was on the previous one. So student name, the meeting date, the SAS ID, which is the student ID number, who the case manager is. Very often we talk to parents and they're not able to find that. So the case manager is right there. Date of birth, the student, the parent or guardian's name, the current grade, the primary disability. And this piece is very big right here. The primary disability used to have all options for primary disability on the old IEP forms. This current one will only show the IEP, the only primary disability that the team has determined is impacting the child's access to general education the most. So it'll only have that one. Important dates on here is the most recent evaluation date, the next evaluation date. So that will be your triennial dates. They should be 3 years apart. And then you also have your last annual review and the next annual review, meaning that you have to have your IEP meeting before that next annual review, so you know when it's due again. And then the reason for meeting is the next bottom spot under there, and it used to be check boxes as well. It could be things like referral, review evaluations, create IEP, any of those things. So it could be multiple things as well, so it's not only one. Where can all the disability categories be found? Watch this. There. So here are our 13 categories, federal categories, I should say. So, and I always kind of suggest parents to know what these are so that you just have a little bit more awareness about the options that are there. Very often we'll talk to families of young children and they are getting developmental delay when there may be something else that fits as well. So you can always kind of learn a little bit more about the other options, but these are them. I'll go through them quickly. There's autism, developmental delay, that is only for ages 3 to 5. Then you have deafness and blindness, emotional disability. It used to be emotionally disturbed. That's been changed recently. Hearing impairment, intellectual disability, multiple disabilities, orthopedic impairments, other health impairment, or OHI, it's referred to as. And then there's OHI ADD/ADHD. That is a Connecticut specific identified primary disability. Then there's specific learning disability, or SLD. And then in Connecticut, we have SLD/dyslexia. So that is also very specific to Connecticut. And then we have speech and language, traumatic brain injury, and then visual impairment, including blindness. So those are your 13 categories. Any student that has an IEP will have one of these primary disabilities. It's just determined by the team, and the team decides which one of these is impacting their access to general education curriculum, so much so that they're in need of specialized instruction. The next section was the planning and placement team meeting members present. So it's just what I really like about this one is that you can list as many people as possible and it doesn't have to squish into little boxes. So it's the name and the role that they have at the PPT. So it'll always have the student there because students are always welcome if they so choose or if it's appropriate, parent or guardian name, and then anyone under it. So any service provider that's there, any guest that is there as the parent brings with them, or any additional people from the staff. So everyone will be identified there with their role. Amendments. This will only show if an amendment has been made. An amendment is something that is made outside of PPT when both the district and the family agrees to make the change to the IEP. So it's filling out a form, it's having a conversation. When the amendment has been put in place, you'll see it here. What the change that's really positive about this new one is that in the old IEP forms, you couldn't really find where the change was. In the new forms, it tells you right here. So it tells the implementation date of the amendment, and then the section name and the text that was actually changed. So you'll be able to find it very quickly when the amendment has been made. And I see there's a question, so let me just check it. This was a direct message, so I'll get back to you and when Leona takes over. So PPT recommendations is the next section. So the planning placement team recommendations, and this will be what the team recommends. It could be anything from evaluations, if you're planning your triennial, it could be service hours, it could be any other change in placement. Anything that is recommended by the team will be listed here, and it'll be listed in chronological order. Not from importance or anything, but just listed about what's going on. And then you have your special factors or considerations. And this is where the team considers each of these areas for each student. This is something that used to be towards the end. This is now in kind of the early part of CT SEDS, so that we have to look at these things. It'll focus on take consideration of behaviors. If the student is deaf or hard of hearing, blind or visually impaired, has limited language proficiency, English proficiency, requires accessible education materials or assistive technology to aid communication. So all these things, if your child has no, then we've checked those, and that means that those things don't apply to your child. If you have yes, it's the behavior one, then the behavior plan will be able to put into the IEP, so we always kind of have access to it. Then we have parents and student input and concerns. Now this used to be at the very top of your IEP or beginning of your IEP. Some parents do it previously to going into PPT, not all. You could share your input and concerns when you go to PPT, or have something official that you want to send out before. But it's highly encouraged to have information about your child shared. Now there will be 3 sections where you'll be able to list your input, concerns, and under the new IEP. So there'll be an area for your academic input and concerns, your functional skills, as well as your functional goals, and then transition if your child is about to be 14 and older. So in Connecticut, we start transition at the PPT where the student will be 14 shortly after. So here is our present levels of performance section. Now, this is, so if you look at the top, it says goal area. This is for your academic goal area. So if this is reading, everything in this section is going to be about reading. So you'll have your present levels of performance in reading. You'll have your strengths in reading listed, your concerns or needs in reading, and then how it impacts that child's how the disability impacts that child's access to the curriculum in reading specifically. Under it, you will have all your goals and your long-term goals and your short-term objectives that are all tied to, again, that reading section. So what's nice about it is that you're going to have everything in one place. Connecticut standard aligned with the goal is going to be listed there as well. And then any related services tied to reading will be there. It'll be the same for math or writing in academic areas. Now, if you look here, this is our function.
We have a quick question. Hold on.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see it.
Can you say where you put in your concerns for the IEP again? So
Sure.
the parent summary.
Sure.
The summary.
So let me go back. So if you look here, you see the kind of highlighted concerns and needs. That's where you're going to list your parent concerns and needs for the academic areas. So it'll be for each section. If you have concerns about math, it'll be under that math goal. If you have concerns for reading, it'll be under there. But then when you look at the next part, now this is your functional goals. So functional goals can be anything where your OT, PT, communication, social emotional services, any of those things. And then you'll have that other highlighted area. You're going to have your concerns and your needs again there. Does that help?
Lisa, excuse me.
No.
Good question. So is that something that parents have access to prior to the PPT, or it's something that's recorded during the PPT?
So you don't necessarily have access to it before. I kind of make sure that I'm having something written down for me not to forget things. When I go into PPT for my own children, I feel very overwhelmed. So I always try to go in with a couple of talking points for each section. So if there's concerns for reading, I jot down strengths as well as areas of concern. And I do that prior, but there's no official paperwork to fill out. Sometimes districts will send things home, but it's not like required.
Okay, so it's a professional at the PPT that's putting our concerns in there. Okay.
Right. Yeah. And it's normally the two that I've been through with the new IEP for my own children, somebody is literally taking notes as we go through. So they're putting it in there. And then again, when you get your IEP, document, you want to read through and make sure that everything that's written in there was what you remembered or you recall from it. But I always kind of do a couple of checklists before.
So we have a couple of questions. Hold on before we go to the, so to Renee, it says, does it say parent input? It does not say parent input here, where we would put it, but they can write the parent. It'd be nice if they use our name. And let's see.
There should be parent input for reading and math for academics separately than bundled. So it can all be together. It could be, the whole team's input as well. So that's really just talking about where we think this student is, the areas of strength, as well as the areas of concern. But it doesn't only have to be the parents.
So Lisa, in this, you're saying that those concerns would actually be part of the legal document of the IEP as listed out. Yep. Then I guess my question is, what weight does that have if it's really kind of a concern? Like, what is then the school responsible for as far as like a parent putting in, for example, if my child is being pulled and it says a small group, I've kind of gone back and forth that I want one-on-one instruction. Perhaps that's something I would put in the comments that I want to continue to push for one-on-one service. But is there any like responsibility on the IEP and the team to follow through with concerns?
So yeah, well, so if you're asking for something specific, right, and it gets to, that would go under prime written notice.
Yeah. Which
we'll talk about, in just a couple of minutes. It wouldn't necessarily go under the concerns here. Okay, so like,
so this is really like when you're going in.
These are your functional, right? These are like, like your checklist of, I have concerns in reading because I don't, they're still failing and we need to increase time or, well, not increase time because we don't want to say that in here, but it's something like that. Like we need a different reading program or something like that you're asking for, that would go under prior written notice. So here the concerns might be, sorry, Lisa, here the concerns might be, I'm not, we don't agree with the improvement. That's, we're concerned with the path that they're currently on or something like that. Okay. Like just kind of a notation of there's something here.
So it could be more specific to like measurement, maybe.
Correct.
Not like an actual action, but we're concerned in the level or the measurement of reading goals or something to that nature.
Almost like talking points. Like this is what we want to talk about when we're in PPT. But Diane, I wrote down your name so that when we get to prior written notice, we can show you exactly where we'll be documenting something where if they refuse, we're going to put it under actions refused and prior written notice.
And we're going to go ahead. We're going to move on in just 1 second. But so to in April, I wrote a parent statement in the past, and this is something a lot of families did and brought with them. Typically, they would just attach it to the IEP. So now, do parents need to break down the statement? They can in some degree. But and then Daisy, you can ask a question. There is a parent, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, and that's why I'm going to table the conversation about where to put information. We do have some optional places coming up. And then so after, when we talk about prior written notice and meeting summary and things like that, we can bring this conversation back up. But Daisy does have a question, so go ahead and unmute and ask.
Hi, how are you? I'm Daisy.
Hi, Daisy.
Nice to meet everybody. I just recently had a PPT meeting like about 3 weeks ago. And my concern, what you said about the concerns and needs, I feel like the concerns and needs on my paperwork, it's not really my concern. It was their concern.
Okay.
It's not what I was concerned about, what I brought up after reading it. And
Okay. So
I guess that's a problem, you know?
Yeah, so we should see the school district's concerns as well as parent concerns. And that's definitely something, if you want, I'm going to throw my email into the chat and email me, and we can set up a time to talk, like go over it specifically about some kind of options that you have. One thing I kind of always say is I email after and say, hey, we didn't really put this in. Can we add this into the IEP areas of concern? This was talked about at PPT. It didn't make it into the documentation. I would really like it added to the parent input and concerns. And it could be as simple as that, because then they say, oh, we totally forgot. So sometimes it's just that they're busy filling in the paperwork at the PPT, and
we're all learning this year. Remember, this is new to all of us as July 2022. And so it's a work, I don't want to say it's a work in progress, but we're working on it together, you know.
Yeah. But it definitely is, it's frustrating when you get, you know, you feel like you've brought all these things to the table and you don't see them there. So you're like, oh my goodness, was I being heard? I think a lot of it is that it's just so new. When I talk to teachers, they say, this is so different than what we did previously, and they're still just learning it. Because think about a caseload. If they only write 10 IEPs a year, that's a lot of IEPs, but they've only written 10 of them this year, you know, or maybe only 5 of them this year. So I'll throw my email in the chat, and if you want, we can set up a time to talk specifics.
Thank you, Lisa. I was going
absolutely.
to mention that I just moved to Connecticut November. So this is all new to me. Like
all of it is new. Yeah. At least you didn't have to learn the old one and now the new one. So you're the right year. Yeah.
Yes.
Excellent. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And Meg had also asked, can you put in concerns at any time or as a parent, or is there specific timing? So these concerns are typically at PPT. You can always call PPTs if you think that it's things that need to be changed, and then they'll be added. But it's pretty much always at.
I guess my question is like reading through it again. It doesn't really clearly state my concerns the way I stated them. It feels much vaguer or much more vague and not as sort of heartfelt as I had hoped that it would be conveyed.
So you can also ask for it to be added to the record of the IEP.
I'm sorry?
You can ask for it to be added to the record if you wanted to.
Okay.
And so we're going to, and that's where like the next we'll go to in just a minute.
Yeah.
I don't want to cut anybody off, but I do, we're going to have a couple more pages to have this conversation.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. So this will be your functional goals. So it'll be any of those things that we were speaking about, such as OT, PT, your areas of behavioral health, developmental, like inclusion, vision or hearing, fine motor, gross motor, any of the daily living activities that'll be here. And again, anything that goes under that. So your communication, if you have speech goals, then your goal will be there, your short-term objectives, the evaluation methods will be under there. And then your service hours will be there as well. So you'll be able to, instead of hopping around looking at only page 11 to see where your service hours are in a grid, we'll see the grid again, but it's all included here as well. So everything under reading, everything under writing, everything under communication, any of those things.
So I'm just going to add that there's a couple of questions about the progress. Are school districts required to provide progress reports concurrent with report card every marking period? The answer to that is yes, they must be provided. Progress reports must be provided at least as frequently as report cards. Actually, yeah, right.
Yeah.
And then where's the state standard listed again? Is it okay if there's not one listed?
So I think this year the districts they don't have to do it, correct?
Correct.
It's a slow progressive information about adding all these things in. So we're hoping for
that is the goal though.
Yeah, that's the goal.
When this came out, the goal was for the state standards to be part of it. This was a lot to take on, a lot of new programming issues and all kinds of things. So this was the one thing they said, okay, we're gonna get all the new IEPs in place, and then we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna make sure that they then align to the state standards.
And the standards will be different for all different levels. So I think it'll be something that's brought in as we go. You might see a couple of them, but you might not. So it's a work in progress. So here are measurable goals and objectives. There will be short-term goals. Just the goals will be the same thing. You'll have your objectives that go under it and your benchmarks, and it'll have your evaluation schedule. And then you'll have your Common Core standards aligned if the district is using those just yet. And then you'll have your related services. So all your evaluation procedures and schedules for progress monitoring will be there as well. Let's see, is there a question?
There is one. There's a question in
services?
there, but we're going to answer it in just a moment.
Yeah, we'll get to that page, but you'll see related services here, and then there's another part of it that they'll talk about all of it. But you will see your related services that are necessary to achieve the goal.
So it's kind of like before it transitions, I guess, over to me. But if you kind of look at it, remember we said in the old IEP you had to flip back and forth, right? You would look at your annual goal, you'd look at your scaffolding goals that would hopefully get you to that annual goal. And then you would look at the core standards are going to be new. We'd have those functional behaviors or someplace else. We would be like, who's going to help with this? And we'd go look at the service grid and we would, see, oh, goal 2 is going to be with this person and this person. This is going to be a little bit easy for us to get everything in one page and look at everything as a chunk. And get a better
designed
picture
to be much more user friendly. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to go to the next page.
Okay. Thank you, Renee. I see your explanation. Hopefully, though, we did answer, Renee, the question about then where are the service hours. So there will be a grid, but there is service related to each goal. Oops. You got to go back one, Lisa. Here we go. So we're going to talk about a little bit about transition planning as part of it. If the student is transition age, depending on the primary disability listed, or depending on their disability, these might be some pages that need to be added. So we'll say a child with autism, they're going to be 14 during this IEP period, or they're 13. Actually, sorry. And we need to talk about the transition. So we're going to list it all out. We go through the list. We're going to say what kind of assessments. The wonderful thing about this new thing is it's also going to show a new page is that it shows the history of assessments done. So they're easily accessible for us as we move from year to year. And you're just going to go through each one. So, does the child have, I'm sorry, I don't know why I just spaced out, specially designed instruction to support independent living skills. We're just going to go through each one. Are they in the meeting, stuff like that. We can go to the next page. And then we keep going. This is where we're going to have our post outcome goal statements, like what is the goal of the transition planning this year, right? So it might be it's going to change from year to year. Well, your post-secondary outcome goal won't, but how we're going to get there is going to. Although some can, I mean, your goals can change, right? As a student develops, especially if we start younger, as we explore and as we do some assessments, our direction might change. Our students might have different ideas, but this is where we're going to continue to go into it. And we're going to look at it as post-secondary education or training, employment, and independent living skills. There's now sections for us to clearly labeled to take a look into and have goals and assessment areas for. And we'll talk about course of study and has the student completed academic requirements because they're still in school or they just in a transition program. And that's, again, concerns and needs highlighted on there because this is where what are your concerns?
And correct me if I'm wrong, Leona, but there will be a minimum of 2 of the 3 post-secondary outcome goals, right?
Yes.
They have to have at least 2 areas. So it'll be
Yes.
post-secondary education and employment, or post-secondary education and independent living, but there has to be at least 2,
Correct.
Just so you know. Okay.
Yes. And you can have all 3 though. I mean, you can have an employment goal that requires a post-secondary training. So you could have all 3. Anyway, continuing on. Transition planning, this is where it is. It's your goals. Again, it's just like the other pages. We're going to have our scaffolded short-term benchmarks that are going to help us reach the goals. And transition goal for employment. And we want to take a look at this is just the same, but we have, if you notice, though, they're just broken up, right? Independent living, we had education, and we had if you go back for just 1 second, Lisa, just to the 21, the top one, we had the post-secondary, you can see how it looks. Then we had the area for employment, okay, and then we had the living skills. And you want to take a look at those. What does that mean? And really think about what have they assessed or how can we assess? And this is individual. That's why we can't have group conversations right now. This is what the pages look like on the IEP. We're not here to talk about what goals will look like, but it's to say we have to take a look at each of these sections and see what is beneficial for this student. Make sure we have the right assessments. And some assessments can take place every year. So don't be afraid of an assessment that has already been done.
I have a question.
Yep.
I'm sorry. The independent living, why I don't see that on my IEP. That's not on my IEP, and I'm just a little concerned.
How old is your child?
7.
That's because transition services start at the age of, at the PPT before they turn 14. So this is kind of the planning for when they go into adulthood. So you start at 13, 14 years old. It used to be 16. And so you won't see any of that stuff because it doesn't apply to them necessarily. It'll literally remember the very first page, it said, is this child at the age or something similar? And you can check yes or no. If you check no, you will not see those pages. Because he's still little, or she.
I never checked it, but okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Renee, you can go ahead and.
Thanks. Going back to the transition, and my daughter it does apply. She's 14. She'll be 15 this month. I'm having a hard time following where things are written.
So,
because you said one is post-secondary and one
Yes.
is what, the independent. Like, where do I see? Oh, guess what? You know what? I think I found it. They're on different pages. I'm looking at my daughter's IEP trying to follow.
Yeah.
And they're cut off. So they're like on one page it says transitional goal area employment, but then on a whole nother page.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Is the independent living, right?
is, yeah, wow, this is just, it's horrendous the way it's written.
It does come out as a separate page, yeah.
Yeah, not its own page. It's like on a half of another one, but then there's this much not written, and then, yeah, okay. I think I found it. Sorry.
Yeah, that's the only
that's
thing
okay.
about the fact that it's just sections now, it just keeps going on. So instead of like the pages before, now it's just sections, so it just goes on and on. So it prints a little bit wild sometimes.
Okay, sorry, 23. So now we're just going to talk about supplementary aids and services. And in here, this is like our accommodations area, right? So we must be specific and appropriate to meet the needs of the child as defined in the IEP. Accommodations are changes made to like materials, content, enhancements, and tasks, but it doesn't change how the student learns. So we can change how they receive it, but we can't change the information they receive. Modifications are changes made to the content, which affect what the student learns, okay? And assistive technology must be discussed for each child, and this is where it's documented in the supplementary aids and services on the IEP. This is what, I'll just go back, and this is what it looks like. So and now they're breaking it down. We can look at accommodations, we can look at modifications, assistive technology, adult support, like a one-on-one, and onward. Go ahead. Indirect services, so supports required for school personnel to implement this IEP. So it could be like a reading coach, or some schools have, or they might have an indirect services for OT or a BCBA to support a BIP, things like that. It's when they're
like you'll see like consults with gen ed and OT, things like that. That'll all be listed here. The other part was where the services will directly be, the person will directly be working with the student. This is indirect services. So they won't be working with the student, they'll be working with the staff that supports the student.
And so related services, what are they? Here's all your related
Sorry,
services.
you're going just a little too fast. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
that's okay.
Can you go back to that?
Yep.
What were you saying about the BIP?
So if a BCBA sometimes will give indirect support, this would be in here. It might be to consult with a BIP or something like that, the implementation of it. So the team can go ahead and do it as intended. But these are your indirect services. So they're the services going to the other members of the team, not directly to the student.
What do you mean by indirect services?
So it can be anything where the team is getting support from another person in the building to support this child, the student. But it's not services given directly to the student. So it's not like 30 minutes of speech where they sit down and help the student. But say if a student has a communication device and the team needs to be trained on it, it would be an indirect service on how to help them communicate with that device for the team so the student can access those things. So that's how it's indirect. It's not directly to the student, but for the benefit of the student.
So consult time would go under there?
Correct. Good. Oh, we have a question. Go ahead, Nicole.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
I had a question about under indirect services. Would that be, say, for example, my son is involved with BESB. If there was any kind of a workshop coming up, would that be considered indirect service where the staff would go to attend that? Would that be something specifically listed to make sure that they would attend? Could we list it there?
it could be listed if the team agreed that they were going to, like, if it was an agreement. If it was just to give them the information, it was up to them, then no, it wouldn't. Because these indirect services do need to be done. Like, it is time that needs to be followed. So, teacher, hearing teacher of the deaf might be under here for a student that has hearing concerns. And they're working with how to implement services in the school, but not their time helping the student, the time helping the staff.
I see. Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. So related services are speech language, psychological services, physical and occupational therapy, counseling services, school health services, transportation, and parent training and counseling. And special education related services page is right. This is what it looks like. It's a little bit bigger than it used to be, hopefully easier to read, but it will say the service, the goal, how many times they're meeting, for how long, and who's responsible, and who's the service implementer. It's usually the school year. And does it say, I can't see, it's where it's, and delivery. So where they're being delivered. What's the instructional site is still listed under site. Nicole, do you have a question, or is your hand still up? I just want to make sure. Okay. Anybody have any questions? Lisa, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Meg, I'll put my contact information right in after. So let's talk about extended school year. Traditionally, parents were thought if your child only showed regression in history, that they'll get services. There are more than one determining factor for ESY services. So ESY is extended school year. It's that summer program. It's normally, right after 4th of July through the first week of August. All districts might have different days. The older they get, the more strange the service hours are, but that can all be talked about here. So this is your extended service school year section. Our extended school year service is required for the student to receive FAPE. FAPE, just so we know, is a free and appropriate public education, and that's under IDEA. And if they are, yes, and then we'll talk about the special education services they'll be getting, as well as the related services. And if you notice, that grid looks just like the page before that had related services. This will have the ones listed that are only for the ESY. So the start and end date will be the month of July, pretty much. So it'll say July 5th through August 4th, or whatever it is. It might change a little bit, but these are just services for extended school year. But the determining factors are as follows, because we often talk to families that say, they didn't offer services. So these are the ways that we can kind of decide. So the nature or severity of the child's disability, student is likely to lose critical skills or fail to recover skills. The student progress is critical to obtain self-sufficiency. The student's behavior prevents the students receiving educational benefit during the school year, or other circumstances identified in the IEP. So it's not just has the child shown regression, it's any of these factors that you can kind of really ask for ESY or ask for services over summer. And then you'll have at the very bottom, you'll see supports required for school personnel to implement this IEP. And those are the indirect services again. So again, not services working directly with the student, but instead working with the team to support them. And then we have transportation. Does the student require specialized transportation? Yes or no. If they don't, then they're going to be on the gen ed bus, or parents could drop them off. And then you'll also, if it says yes, then it talks about the regular transportation or the special transportation provided, what supports they'll need, the specialized equipment. So if the child is a wheelchair user, what kind of bus are they going to be taking that is able to lock their wheelchair in? and vehicle requirements that'll be necessary for it. And then here we have removal of general education. This talks about the time spent with neurotypical peers. So under IDEA, it's every children's right to be educated alongside their non-disabled peers. So this talks about the number of hours they will be with peers and the number of hours they will be without. Now, if a child's outplacement to a special education school, then it's going to have 0 hours for neurotypical peers because there are none available at that school. But you'll see the length of the school year, it's normally 182 days, length of the school day, total number of hours, and then under it, you'll see the start date, end date, special education hours, the hours with non-disabled peers, and the percentage of time per disabled peer. So you'll see all that information. Then under it, it says, explain to the extent to which the student will not participate in general education classes and non-academic activities with non-disabled peers. So we want to know, why is it that we're not having this child participate in gen ed? An example is my son is 8 years old. He is autistic. He is just starting reading. So him being a second grader, it's not necessarily appropriate for him to be in the independent part of Reader's Workshop. So he does the whole group with his class, and then he goes and does specialized instruction in an alternative setting. So that is considered time that he's spending with without non-disabled peers, if that makes sense. And the justification for the removal. Will the student be removed from general education environment for 60% more of the time? So if the child is removed 60% or more, then they have to do the LRE checklist. LRE stands for the least restrictive environment, because we want our students to be in their least restrictive environment so that they are able to flourish and learn the best that they can. So sometimes if they're being pulled out more than 60%, we want to look and say, is this the environment that they need, or do we need an alternative? And then, I'm sorry, the last question is, at the time of implementation, will the student be living in a private residential facility? So those are students that are in an outplacement that's also a residential facility, meaning that they live on campus. And then we get into state and district testing. So state and district testing are two separate things. The state is pretty much SBAC testing. And the district testing is what the district has decided, their benchmark tests, things like that. So has the student been identified as an English learner? Yes or no? English language proficiency assessment is required for all English language learners from K to 12. And then we talk about the student will participate in those assessments for language. Under it, it'll talk about, so in the school year, so say you're at the beginning of the fall, your child's in second grade, what district assessments are they going to be taking that school year? They'll be listed there, and their participation. So if it's a benchmark that is a district assessment that all kids in second grade have to do, then that has to be listed there. If there's, as you go up older, if there's SBAC in 5th grade, it has to be, oh, no, sorry, not yet. This is where we're going to list those. The statewide assessments will have your SBAC test. That'll be your state assessments. And what grade will the child be going in during that next statewide assessment? Statewide assessments are always done at the same time of the school year, so you'll know which grade they'll be in. So even if you're in June, it'll be the next year. If it's the beginning of the school year, so it all depends. The student will participate in the Smarter Balance Assessment, which is your SBAC testing. Participation with accommodations, and then specific accommodations for the SBAC test will be listed here. And then participation without will be listed right under it if your child does not need it. So this is just talking about the assessments, what accommodations they may need going into it. And then this last part.
There was just one more question, sorry. It says, should students in a specialized outplacement have this form too? So I just want to make sure, Renee, the state and district testing, this page here? Yes, okay, yes. So if the student's outplaced, should they have this form as well? And the answer is yes.
Yes. Okay. Yes, so our students are still gen ed students first before they are special education students, and their requirements are for them to participate in all these things. Now, Some students will not participate in the SBAC test, and they'll be doing the CTAA alternative assessment. And that is, what is the percentage, Leona, do you know, of students that per district they try to keep it at?
I want to say it's 3.
I want to say it's 3 too.
What's the name of it again?
Connecticut Alternative Assessment.
And there's a checklist to determine, like there's a checklist of eligibility for that.
And it's really, you know, my child I told you, is a non-reader. So him participating in SBAC next year seems a little bit daunting. We haven't gotten to that decision yet, so I can let you know when we do. But I don't necessarily know if it's appropriate for him to be taking SBAC testing. I would prefer him to be taking the alternative assessment at this point. But that will be listed here if your child meets the checklist criteria. So then this is a big one. So transfer of rights. Transfer of rights, every student, no matter their disability, will become an adult at 18 years old. So they are legal age at 18 to make their own decisions. So this is the part where we talk about the transfer of rights. At least 1 year prior to reaching the age of 18, the student must be informed of their rights under the IDEA that they'll transfer at age 18. So it's just a checkbox of, will the student be 17? Yes or no, and the data support and documentation. Now, at least 1 year before, there are other options if parents and students decide that this is something parents still want to be involved in, including guardianship, conservatorship, and a power of attorney, or a student can sign a release for their parents to continue to make educational decisions. So those are the options when your child turns 18 years old and the transfer of rights happens. Then we have progress reporting and resources. I know that this was asked earlier. A report of progress toward meeting the annual goals and short-term objectives, including this IEP, will be provided to the parents. So it's typically when the report cards come out. So if it's quarterly, you will get a progress report quarterly. There are those things that come in the mail really thick. It talks about satisfactory, unsatisfactory, not introduced, mastered, any of those things. So they should be happening the same time report cards come out. If your child is attending ESY, you will also get one at the end of ESY. Yeah. I'm going to turn it back over to Leona. Are there any other questions? We're doing okay?
Oh, there is a question about ESY.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Let me see.
No, that's okay. I was waiting because we had already passed the ESY. So it says, can school districts deny ESY if the student performs at grade level and standardized testing the only factor? Is standardized testing the only determining factor?
I would say that they need to look back at the child's history of regression. If their disability impacts them significantly, summer is like 2.5 months long. So if your child is going to regress, or if they've shown other years that they haven't had ESY where they've regressed, then I would push for ESY services. As they get older, ESY services change a little bit. So depending on the age of the student. Leona, what do you think?
No, I agree. If a student is in special education, there's a reason that they're there.
Yeah.
Do they need the summer, that time? They're not there to learn new skills. It's about retaining their skills. And you have to make a decision, as a family, as a district, what is going to be best for the child. And I think it varies from year to year. I think sometimes they're, it's appropriate. Yeah. Maybe sometimes you guys agree that maybe not this year. Maybe this program isn't appropriate for my child, or whatever the case may be. Right. Extended school year is not a one size fits all kind of thing.
Yeah. Sometimes we choose camp instead of ESY. Sometimes. And that's a team decision that we make. So if it's a focus on social skills and he's not necessarily going to get as many social opportunities at ESY, then I choose camp sometimes. At least one day, 1 week this summer, I pull him out of ESY and put him in camp. Awesome. Thank you so much.
So onward. So we're going to talk about, so we're going to get to the stuff that you guys were talking about earlier. So if you have any more questions, but the meeting summary, this is optional. And this is that kind of section that we had before where we kind of put in that parent concern on the top. It is not a requirement, but it is there, so you can ask the team to use it. It is merely a lined paper that can be used if the team agrees. Anybody have any questions about that? Because I think this is where a lot of ours falls into. Remember, we had that box. This is the box. It's now a separate document. And oh, by the way, it's also optional. A separate document is no longer part of the IEP. So again, prior written notice is also no longer part of the IEP. It is a separate form. Prior written notice is required by federal and state special education law. The new prior written notice format was designed to support better understanding of actions proposed or refused by the district. This is where we were talking about like some of those specific things, like I suggested they do this, they said no or yes, this is where it would be. Some information will be narrative format and no longer in check boxes. This allows for more detail in the explanation, and it must be provided to the parent at least 10 days before the action is taken, or the 10-day notice may be waived by the parent. Go ahead, Lisa, next page. So I know it's a little bit hard to read, but this is the prior written notice. So you'll see it says, you know, actions proposed, refused. And so I think I have to lean forward. I'm sorry. We're just going to go ahead and check the boxes that apply. The district is proposing to, the district is refusing to. So if they didn't want to, they denied something, then we would put it on here. And they would list their reasons underneath. And this needs to be done for every action proposed and or denied. Okay. Other options, the PPT considered is still on there. So it says, if there was other things that were brought up, we want every single thing listed. Sorry, Lisa, go ahead. I was still squinting. I said the new format was, no, you can go ahead. So next
I was going to say, so I think of prior written notice. Prior written notice is the old page 3. So you want to, if you are talking about things that the team has agreed, they're going to be under actions proposed. If you request something and the district has stated no, then you'd ask for it to be put under your prior written notice, and you want it documented as such. The same thing as the district can, if they suggest something and the parent refuses, it should be under actions refused on the prior written notice as well. So you really want, it's really where to keep proper documentation of the things that were agreed to and the things that were not agreed to.
Correct. Any questions about this? Other factors that are relevant. Oh, see, I was squinting. It was on the next page, and I should know this. There's no factors or other, and we would list them. And then on prior written notice, we also put, make sure that they've received their parental rights. We got to say how it was delivered. And if you notice, CPAC is listed on there for if you need assistance and understanding. Special education director, the state's PTI, which is us, and our number is listed, and it is much bigger than in the past. So wins all around. Next page. So on the record of meeting, a record of meeting is a form used instead of the IEP for meetings that do not alter the IEP in any way. So these are examples that don't result, for example, a referral PPT that does not result in an agreement to evaluate. So this is like PPT 1. Other PPTs not resulting in a change may include a manifestation determination, an excessive restraint and seclusion, and a program review with no changes. So if you do a PPT and you're just going over the program and at the end there's no changes made, they could choose to do a record of meeting, and that would be okay. And this
Sarah,
is a separate document.
Sorry, Sarah had a question. What if they refuse to put something into your prior written notice that you've requested that they put in? So often something will get left out, but if you request it to be put in, it really should be in there. What do you think,
Yeah.
Leona?
No, it's if it's not listed in prior written notice, and then that's when they're refused to put it there, then it would need to go into you can file a complaint. You could take your you can go, depending on what it is. I mean, it's hard to tell you what steps to take, but if they refuse to put it in prior written notice, then you're in violation of parental rights. So you have to document everything. And a lot of times when we're in PPTs, we'll say, okay, I guess we're agreeing to disagree. Please write this in prior written notice as action denied and your reason why, so that families can then take the next steps. Sometimes you have to be that direct. But if they're refusing to write it, then I go back to PPT and do it again. Or again, you know, give us a call. There's other options, unfortunately, that you would need to take. But the IEP is a legal document. So if you're not legally recording everything that happens, then it's not an accurate document. And this is why we have meetings about this and trainings, and let's learn where all the stuff is, because this is a legal document about our child's education. It's a working document. We change it all the time, and that's okay, but it needs to be there. So this is what the record of meeting would look like. You would not get the rest of the IEP. You would just get this in those 4 circumstances.
So I'm going to launch a poll for our evaluation, if you guys can do that. I also, when I'm doing that, or when you're filling it out, I wanted to tell you about a program that we have at CPAC. It's an 8-week training course. It's called Next Steps. It starts next week, actually. We're holding it in Bridgeport this season. We are going to be holding it in, hopefully, Middletown in the fall. We try to hit up different parts of the state to have access to people, but it's free. It's kind of like, I always think of it and refer to it as a crash course in special education for families or professionals. Because I was a gen ed teacher for a long time and I only had to take one special education course. So when my child was young, I took this just to kind of figure out what I needed to know before going to the public schools. So it starts next week. If you're interested in it, please reach out to me.
Lisa, can you repost the poll?
Oh, yeah.
Thanks, Amy. Amy said she loved Next Steps.
Oh, thank you. Oh, I don't relaunch. There we go. Oh, it'll clear our existing things.
That's right. Can everybody redo it?
Sorry, it takes me a long time to read it.
Sure, don't apologize.
No, that was my fault. I was like, I think I hit it. So I apologize. Okay. You're out of the way.
Amy, I remember you. Yeah, I think Next Step is a great opportunity, especially if you're struggling with communication between school, or even if you're at the beginning of your special education journey, your child's just been diagnosed or just gotten a 504 or an IEP. We can just explain everything. It's really nice too to meet other families of special education students and be able to kind of learn from kind of the people who've been doing it a little while. I go to Leona all the time because her kids are a little bit older than mine. So I'll say, transition is coming up for us. I need support. And it's nice to be able to talk to other families who get it.
Excuse me, I have to fill that out?
If you could.
If you could. But if not, that's okay too.
Because I would like to fill it out, but I can't because I have dyslexia. So like my reading, I'm looking at, I can't fill it out. I don't, if I
That's
could.
okay. Don't worry about it. It will
worry about it.
disappear whether you do it or not, but thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. Information here, I'm going to put in.
I did put your email in, Lisa, and mine, but you can definitely put it again.
I'll put it in again. And Leona, I always get your last name I have to look at it.
Me too. I messed up my own last name.
Okay, I think that's right. So those are our emails. Thank you for completing the poll. I appreciate it. So let's kind of bring everything together. So the IEP is the primary vehicle for describing students' needs and strengths. Because remember, our kids have strengths. We don't always want to be talking about the stuff that they're struggling with. They're defining appropriate services and supports, and then we're monitoring towards progress towards meeting IEP goals. And then here is more information. If you have questions, you can contact your school district. If you want to talk to one of us, we have, how many people is it now? 14 parent consultants? I don't think that many, maybe around there. We all have children ranging in different ages. We've all had different experiences. Our children all have different disabilities, but we're happy to talk to you and support you that way. And then Drew, I didn't get to write you back, but if you could reach out, email me. I think you have my email. Oh, I think she left. I'll email her. Well, thank you so much.